people with an animal on my head?
I hope the shell doesn't travel.
Johnny Carson was once the man America welcomed into its homes. Every single night. The king of late night, he shaped The Tonight Show into a cultural icon, bringing laughter, wit, and a sense of connection to millions for 3 decades. He didn't just host the show, he became part of the rhythm of American life. Then, it all came to an end. On his final night in 1992, Johnny said goodbye with a gentle smile and a few simple words of thanks. No tears, no high drama, no attempt to cling to the spotlight. It was an understated end, so much so that everyone thought he'll be back.
Johnny leaves. What nobody realized is that when you left, you were going to pack it up and take it with you, which is what he did, because that show never existed again.
But he vanished. No interviews, no public appearances, not a single explanation. It wasn't until 2005 that Johnny Carson's name returned to the news, but it was for a final farewell.
Kept audiences up past their bedtime for decades, bringing together the best and the quirkiest entertainers. Now people from around the country are mourning the death of Johnny Carson.
Why did the man beloved by America, while he was alive, have no one beside him at the very end? When did that silence begin? And what truly made him choose to leave the spotlight so completely and so definitively? Hey, before he became the icon beloved by millions of Americans, Johnny Carson was just a shy boy in Corning, Iowa. He preferred to be alone, reading comics, and was captivated by the simple magic tricks he taught himself from books. While other children played outside, Johnny would stand before a mirror, practicing his smile and talking to himself. It was the beginning of a habit, finding safety in performance in a place where he was in control. Johnny's childhood lacked warmth. His mother, Ruth, was a stern woman who rarely showed affection. She would criticize her son, even when he tried to make her laugh. Years later, Johnny would say, "My mother could turn a sunny day into a rainy day." But this craving for her approval drove him to pursue perfection, a need that would shape him into a meticulous host, one who controlled every single moment on the air. As a young man, Johnny served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. It was there he discovered an ability to make others laugh and feel at ease, a skill that would later become the foundation of his career. After the war, he studied radio at the University of Nebraska, where he began to understand his true joy wasn't in being noticed, but in making others feel comfortable while they noticed him. While studying broadcasting at Nebraska, he began hosting small shows on local radio. And it was here Johnny realized something important. He didn't want to be the one who was admired. He wanted to be the one who made others feel comfortable. This was the biggest and deepest reason he chose to become a host. For Johnny, the stage wasn't a place to show off talent. It was a shield. On stage, he could control everything: his voice, his timing, his gaze, the pauses. No one could hurt him if he was the one controlling the dialogue. From small shows at the local station to his first performances in California, Johnny gradually defined his style: subtle, natural, and understated. He never laughed loudly at his own jokes. Instead, he let the audience have the reaction. It set him apart in an era of television defined by loud personalities. In 1962, NBC asked him to replace Jack Paar as the host of The Tonight Show. At first, Johnny refused. He feared fame, the constraints of national television. But he eventually agreed, and for the next 30 years, America went to bed to that familiar voice. Every night, he became a familiar presence in millions of homes. People trusted him. They felt he was a part of their lives. He didn't just interview stars, he made them seem more human. He created a space where the audience could laugh, relax, and briefly forget the troubles of the outside world. Johnny Carson was more than just a host. He was an icon of civility, wit, and composure, representing an America that believed in grace and self-control. In his prime, he was the embodiment of safe comfort, a kind of entertainment gentle enough not to offend, yet smart enough to be respected. At the peak of his fame, Johnny Carson had it all: power, respect, and the love of millions of viewers. But even then, something few people saw was becoming clear. that success couldn't touch the emptiness inside him. Johnny was never one for crowds. After each taping, he often left the studio by a private exit, without greeting anyone. Staff on his team said he only smiled when the camera was on and became silent the moment the light went off. That shift confused many people. They didn't know which one was the real Johnny. Peter LaSalle, a producer for The Tonight Show, once said Johnny was not an extrovert. He just played one every night. The more famous he became, the more walls he built around himself. He limited his Hollywood event appearances, turned down party invitations, and kept a habit of dining alone. Close friends recalled he could talk enthusiastically about the universe, about the stars in the sky, but almost never about his own feelings. In his private life, that distance was even more apparent. Johnny went through two broken marriages, both due to emotional distance and a habit of avoiding dialogue. Fame didn't help him heal, it only made him withdraw deeper. Each divorce was another wall he built between himself and the world. People who worked with him said Johnny could be unpredictable. Cold, irritable, then friendly moments later, as if nothing had happened. That contradiction reflected the two people within him, the perfect host in public and a man lost in his own life. The public at the time had no idea. On television, Johnny remained the symbol of grace and humor, but behind that familiar smile, loneliness had begun to eat away at him. Eventually, a time came when everything he tried to keep hidden could no longer be concealed. And then, everything changed. When Johnny Carson announced his retirement in 1992, the audience assumed he was only temporarily leaving television, that he would return for a memoir, or at least one interview looking back at his brilliant career. But that never happened. Immediately after the final broadcast of The Tonight Show, Johnny retreated to his villa on the coast of Malibu. He stopped appearing in public and cut off contact with nearly all of his former colleagues. No events, no interviews, no reminiscences. It reached a point where many in the media had to ask, is Johnny Carson still alive? In an era where celebrities constantly find ways to keep their names in the headlines, Johnny's silence became a paradox. But for him, it wasn't a loss. It was a release. After 30 years in the spotlight, he chose to withdraw into the shadows, far from the noise he had spent his whole life learning to endure. In reality, that withdrawal wasn't just a career decision. It was the result of years of accumulation, of pain, exhaustion, and illness. Johnny was a heavy smoker. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, he smoked 40 to 60 cigarettes a day, even during tapings. He once joked, "If I didn't smoke, I wouldn't know what to do with my hands." But by the early 1990s, the consequences started to show. He had a chronic cough, lost his breath mid-sentence, and often had to rest between segments. In 1991, doctors diagnosed him with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, an illness that left his lung capacity at just 60%. For a man whose image was tied to vitality and energy, this was a powerful blow. Johnny knew the audience loved the image of a host full of energy. He didn't want them to see him weakened, gasping for air, or tired, so he chose to withdraw before that could happen. After retiring, his illness continued to worsen. He avoided public places for fear of pitiful stares. Even when walking on the beach, he chose times when no one was around. By the early 2000s, he had to be on an oxygen tank 24 hours a day. Despite this, there were rumors he never truly quit smoking. It was the final paradox of Johnny Carson, the man who made all of America laugh every night, but was terrified of being seen at his most vulnerable. In the years after his retirement, Johnny suffered two more major shocks. In 1991, his second son, Rick, died in a car accident at age 39. Years later, a relative revealed Johnny blamed himself for not being closer to his son, for being too consumed by work. He once told a friend, "I could make millions of people laugh, but I couldn't make my son stay." 4 years later, his eldest son, Christopher, died of lung cancer, the same disease that was slowly killing Johnny himself. These successive losses made him withdraw even more. He stopped receiving visitors, didn't answer the phone, and even limited conversation with his wife, Alexis Mass. Those who knew Johnny said he wasn't bitter or withdrawn out of resentment, but because he no longer had the strength to share his pain. He chose silence as a way to survive. When the press tried to contact him, Johnny always refused. He didn't participate in tributes. He didn't accept special interviews. He didn't write a memoir, even when offered millions of dollars. For him, his career was over, and he had nothing left to prove. However, he would occasionally send a few short monologue jokes to his old friend David Letterman, for Letterman to read on his show without revealing the writer. It was Johnny's way of staying on the air without having to appear, a quiet presence, almost invisible, true to his nature. In his final years, Johnny kept his routine of reading Astronomy magazine, doing crosswords, and looking at the stars at night. Neighbors said they would sometimes see a light from his balcony late at night and knew he was looking up at the sky, a place where he could be alone, unjudged, and unobserved. When Johnny Carson died in January 2005 from respiratory failure, America was stunned. There was no public funeral, no memorial speech. He left exactly as he had lived for more than a decade prior, quietly, privately, and in absolute silence. For the public, it was the end of an icon. But for Johnny, perhaps it was the first time he was truly at peace. After Johnny Carson passed away in January 2005, a wave of mourning spread across America. But no one was truly sure what to mourn. He had been gone from public life for over a decade. No goodbye, not one appearance, leaving no trace of his life. When the news of his death was announced, many realized they hadn't heard his voice in an entire generation. Former friends described his departure as being exactly like his life, controlling every detail, even the manner of his disappearance. He left the bulk of his estate, around $300 million to charitable foundations for medical research and education. But it was never publicly announced. He didn't want praise, and he didn't want sentiment. To Johnny, kindness only had meaning when it didn't need to be seen. His passing left a strange void. People began to look back at his years holding the microphone on television, the gentle conversations, the steady laughter, the effortless grace. In a world growing louder and more extreme, people realized Johnny Carson represented something modern television had lost: composure, moderation, and kindness. But behind it all, the biggest question remained. Why did a man who was so beloved choose to live and die in isolation? Perhaps Johnny Carson never truly belonged in the public light. He only borrowed it, searching for a sense of acceptance his childhood hadn't provided. When he finally had it all, he realized the one thing he truly needed was silence. In a rare conversation, producer Peter Lassley once said, "Johnny wasn't lonely. He was just tired of pretending he wasn't." Perhaps that is the most accurate definition of his life. A man who spent his entire life bringing joy to others, while quietly escaping his own spotlight. Today, when people speak of Johnny Carson, they don't just remember the legend of late-night television. They remember the lesson he left behind, that sometimes behind the fame and the laughter is a very human need: to be quiet, to breathe, and to just be yourself.